All right, welcome back to the Picking Your Brain podcast, where we interview people doing ministry at a high level. And on today's episode, we are lucky to have Brad Watson. What's up, Brad?
Hey Blake, man, good to be on here with you. I'm looking forward to it. Enjoy this time with you.
Man, I'm excited to have you on, and I don't want to give too much of your intro away, but Brad was one of the student pastors in my area whenever I was in high school. He was at another church in our area and absolutely loved their ministry and what they did. And then when I became student pastor at one of our local churches here in Halton, he was so kind to me and brought me in and was not never the guy that was like, I'm big brother to you. Whatever. He was always was just like so kind and never look down on me. So I'm so thankful for you and your ministry and all that you've done for me as a student and now as a student pastor. And so I'm excited to have you on to get to hear more about your ministry and for other people to hear about your ministry. And so anyway, thank you for being willing to come on.
Yeah, thanks, Blake, and thanks for those kind words. But I look up to you as well. And
Oh,
even though you're a lot younger in ministry, the things that you're doing and have done, man, has blessed me and has blessed Halton, and so that's blessed me. And because our ministries have just overlapped each other so many times, and so thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, no problem. And what I've always loved about our ministries, even before I was here, is that Halton and Eastville were able to work together. Our student ministries, both very healthy, good-sized student ministries in a small town, were able to work well together and show the community that, hey, we're all on the same team. We're all trying to love Jesus. You know, it doesn't matter which one you attend, as long as you're attending and loving Jesus. And so, anyway, I've appreciated your friendship and ministry for a long time. But anyway, if
Same here.
somebody may not, if somebody may not know who you are, would you let them know where you're serving and what God has you doing right now?
All right. Well, I was, of course, 14 years at Eastwood Baptist Church in Halton. And then in 2022, I transitioned and became the senior pastor at First Baptist Church of Vidalia, Louisiana. And, I joke around. I begged the Lord to send me to Texas. And he pulled a Jonah and he sent me in the opposite direction, or I did the Jonah, whatever. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
but I love it over here in Vidalia. There's some great ministry happening here. And, it was quite a transition, but I'm thankful for over 20 years in youth ministry. And I feel like I am where I am today because of that experience. And so.
Well, just to touch on that, this is something I've been saying to some of my buddies. This is off subject now, kind of, but I believe some of the best pastors were once student pastors. And I believe that because as student pastors, we have to be the media guy, we have to be the worship pastor, we have to be the discipleship pastor, we have to be the finance guy. We have to do everything as a student pastor. And so once you move up into that role, you have people that do those things for you now. And so anyway, that's from my perspective as a guy who's still doing it. Do you think that that's true, or do you think that's helpful?
Yeah, I do. I think a lot of that's true. I do think there was a sense in ministry, and I think it was one of the reasons why I stayed in youth ministry for as long as I did, was I saw a lot of guys who were just becoming really great youth pastors transition out and become average pastors, and I always kind of thought they were in their prime
Yeah.
of youth ministry when that happened. And that always kind of made me sad when I saw that. And
Yeah.
so, that was one of the reasons why I felt like, I wanted to stay in youth ministry for as long as I did. Of course, bearing the Lord's call on my life to continue to do that. But I always had this fear, that in my prime of youth ministry, I would leave and become a mediocre pastor somewhere. And I never wanted that to happen.
Yeah.
Uh, so, yeah, I see it both ways, but I also see, the diversity in ministry that you described in youth ministry is very helpful to
Mm-hmm.
becoming a pastor, especially. And I'll tell you this, for sermon prep, um, you know, uh, when I would, for 10 years preach to students, I never got hardly any feedback. Students never would
Yeah.
come up and tell you, man, that was a
Yeah.
great message. You did awesome. you know, uh, but you go preach one time in big church,
Yeah.
everybody's going to come to you and pat you on the back. And, the preaching in front of students is a lot harder. And it
Yeah.
takes a lot more prep, and it takes a lot more creativity, and you're dealing with their time, their attention spans, and you're dealing with their lack of knowledge of biblical truth. And so I think the years and years of doing that and doing that hopefully effectively has just made me a better preacher
Yeah.
in my sermon prep time now.
Well, cool. You led perfectly into the first question, so let's transition to it. What does your sermon prep look like? Like, what resources do you use? How much time do you spend, especially with students and now with adults? And then, like, what do you take with you to the pulpit? That's something that's fun to me to always get to learn. Like, do you take like a little bit of notes? Do you have a manuscript? So what are all those things for your sermon prep?
Okay. Well, I'll kind of take you back when I was,
Yeah.
early in youth ministry. You get finished with a Wednesday night, and you're tired, or you show up to work on Thursday morning, and that's like our Friday, because I was off on Friday, so that was my Friday. But that could have been a kind of a slack off day. It could have been a day where you just recoup from Wednesday night. But I saw it differently. I would begin my Thursday mornings with sermon prep, and I wanted it to come fresh off of Wednesday night, fresh off of just what I preached on, the reaction, the responses, the students who were there, and I wanted it to be fresh when I approached God's Word that next morning. And so Thursday mornings would begin my sermon prep for the next Wednesday night.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like as well I had more time then for the creative juices to flow before next week, and to begin to think about videos that would be appropriate, or any other kind of addition to the sermon that takes time to come up with. If you wanted to do an illustration or an object lesson, that I was giving myself plenty enough time to marinate on that text and as I studied it. So Thursday mornings, that would be my sermon prep time for the next week.
Okay.
And most everybody in the office knew I was going to shut my door on Thursday mornings and have that time to do that. But the other thing was the biggest part of my sermon prep time would happen on Monday nights as well. We had a high school leadership team, and I knew from Thursday to Monday that I would be able to come up with a plan to teach that leadership team, the text for that next Wednesday night, and basically preach it to them and talk to them about it, get their feedback, and they would actually help me prepare the parts of the sermon. For sure, they would help kind of lead me into the direction that it should go, just based on their questions and their responses from that. And then, of course, from there, it would just, Tuesday, Wednesday, a little bit here, a little bit there. But by Tuesday afternoon, I'd be putting together, my PowerPoint, my outline, and those kinds of things. So I basically do the same thing today as a pastor. I don't know anybody else that does this, but it works for me. On Sunday afternoons at 2:00, I come to the office, and I have from 2 to 5, and nobody else is here. And I do my sermon prep on Sunday afternoons from 2 to 5. I begin. And again, it's just something that I learned, that I wanted it fresh. And I wanted it coming right off of, I just preached. I just saw the reactions of people, the responses of people, looking at people in the eyes, remembering kind of some of that nonverbal feedback that I was getting. And I wanted all of that to be fresh on my heart as the Lord was leading me into the text for the next week. So that was kind of the timeline, that I would use. And I would say, now, this is another thing, in youth ministry, I mainly preached on Wednesday nights. But now I'm preaching on Sunday mornings, and we have a service on Wednesday nights. And that was a hard transition for me at first, to get into the routine of preaching 2 messages a week like that. And I know some pastors who preach 3, and they're going to watch this and go, "Yeah, a bunch of lazy boys." Like, I'm like struggling to preach 2, but I think just getting into it on Sunday, and probably a Sunday morning message, you're looking about 8 hours of prep time. A Wednesday night message, I'm probably 5 or 6 hours of prep time on that. As far as resources go, when I was in seminary, and now it's the late great Jim Shaddix was my preaching professor. I remember one particular exam he gave us, and it was I can't remember the question. I don't remember everything about it, but the answer to the question was only found in John MacArthur's commentary.
Okay.
Out of all the hundreds of commentaries out there. And
Yeah.
like I remember I went through commentaries, looking up things, and he basically said I tricked everybody, and you can only the only answer was found in this one commentary. And so that kind of led me to using John MacArthur's commentary.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be one of my main resources that I use. Um, but I also like William Barclay's commentaries. I use him a lot. I love Matt Chandler, David Platt, Tony Merida. Those guys are all guys my age. I went to seminary with David
Mm-hmm.
and Tony, and so I enjoy them. But I don't have I don't have a lot of resources. I don't think
Yeah.
being in youth ministry for as long as I was. I didn't just develop this great library of commentaries and resources, probably like I should have. And so, today I think I have a good amount, and I think
Yeah.
it's, what I need right now. But that would be an area I probably am growing in as a pastor is,
Yeah.
is learning some new resources. Preachingtoday.com has been one that I've used recently that I've enjoyed. Back in my youth ministry days, I enjoyed Download Youth Ministry and hearing from other youth pastors and getting a lot of their resources. And, we share things. And so I do that as well, today with other pastors. And, I watch y'all's online service a lot. And Gavin is still someone I enjoy. And I
Oh,
write notes down and take some of his words. And
yeah.
I'm all about sharing when it comes to that. As far as what I take to the pulpit, I'm old school and very old school. So I take a 3-ring binder. It looks just like that. And
Nice.
I take that with me. I manuscript my sermons out. And then of course, I study it and go over it enough that you wouldn't really know that I'm constantly looking at my notes. But yeah, I have it completely manuscript out each week when I go to
Mm-hmm.
the pulpit.
Okay. Nice. Well, those are as you were saying those, I wanted to be I have a John MacArthur series, under the commentaries. That was I was doing sermon prep for my message on Wednesday, and that's one I have the whole New Testament series. When I graduated with my master's, they gave me a little gift card to Christian bookstore or whatever, and I just bought the whole series because I enjoy those as well. And then my other one, I used Tony Evans' commentary. Um, I don't know. This is it's so good. I love his commentary as well. But anyway, great. Those are really cool. And it's so fascinating. You said that you Sunday afternoon during normal pastor nap time. That is when you're
Mm-hmm.
back in the saddle doing sermon prep. That's really interesting. Yeah, because I think most pastors are done. They're like, I'm wiped for the day. I'm gonna go home, take a nap, and you're right back in it. That's really cool.
Right. Well, it's one of
But
those disciplines that I had to discipline myself, just especially not being in that 2 sermon preps a week kind of
yeah,
role. That was a lot, and it is. If you're not used to that, it becomes a lot. And so I knew I needed to get a head start, and it just became a time with me and the Lord on Sunday afternoons. That's I really wouldn't want to do anything else now than spend that time, prepping and just seeking the Lord's face for that next week. So yeah, I go home, eat lunch, get about a 30-minute break, and then I come back and it works for me. So.
and now I'm being nosy, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on this because I'll chase this rabbit trail. But like, are your Wednesday nights and your Sundays the same topic, or do you have a Wednesday night series and a Sunday series? Like our pastor Gavin will walk through Exodus. Right now we're going through Exodus. Wednesday and
Yes.
Sunday are Exodus. We're just walking through it. Is that what you do?
Right. No. So I do on Sunday mornings right now. We're finishing up Luke. I've been in Luke for 2 years.
Mhm.
since I've been here. We started Luke, and I'll finish it in May. And so on Wednesday nights, I'll go through the Old Testament,
Okay.
and I've been going through the minor prophets in the Old Testament for about 2 years. And I'm on Zechariah, so I've got Malachi to go, and then I'll be finished with that. But I'll always balance it that way, and that's what I
Yeah.
tell our congregation. Hey, I want to invite you back because on Sunday mornings we're going through the New Testament. On Wednesday nights we're going through Old Testament books. So
Yeah.
come and join us. And so it's really neat. It started when I first got here. I wanted to do a series on Wednesday nights called Jesus in the Old Testament,
Okay.
and so I was going through Luke, and then I was doing Jesus in the Old Testament, and that's when it just kind of hit me. I think this is a good balance for me and for our church
Yeah.
to go through the New Testament on Sunday morning, Old Testament on Wednesday night, and then eventually we'll flip flop, and I'll do
Okay.
Old Testament on Sunday morning, New Testament on Wednesday night. But keeping that balance, I think, is good for me.
I gotcha. Again, sorry, that was my nosy. I just like to hear how people do that. All right, second question we'll transition to is as you talked about earlier, you did have a lot of creative juices, I think, in student ministry. You did a lot of creative things. So, what would you say was the most unique or creative event or activity that you did with students?
Well, as far as an event goes, this was an evangelistic event and by the way, I may have some creative juices, but mainly I surrounded myself with people who had a lot of good creative juices.
Mm.
And I had a great team that I worked with there, volunteers and high school leadership team. They really came up with these ideas, and I just kind of helped them along with it. But we did a thing called Escape Eastwood Manor, and it was done at around Halloween time. And what we wanted to do was create an event where we could use at the time escape rooms were really popular. I think there was one in Bossier, maybe one in Shreveport, but it was kind of a new thing. So we were like, let's do something that can attract students to this event. And so we kind of modeled it, called it Escape Eastwood Manor. We were thinking, let's make it spooky.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a Scooby-Doo theme. And we did most of the promotion using some Scooby-Doo artwork. And we asked the kids to dress up in their favorite Scooby-Doo character when they come to it. And so a lot of them did that. Some of them just did
Mm-hmm.
some Halloween costumes. That was fun too. But we transitioned our whole space, our youth space, into an old spooky manor.
Mm-hmm.
We had a ballroom that they all came in, and that's where they first met. We had food there, we had music going, and the ballroom was kind of the safe place. That as they came into the ballroom, they could hang out with their friends, they can listen to music, they could eat some food. But then we had this east wing where there was a door that basically said, "Do not enter, beware." Um, East wing of Eastwood Manor's haunted, all this kind of stuff. And so
Yeah.
they would have to get into groups of 20 to 30 and get a group together, and they would go through the East Wing. And once they entered it, they go up some stairs. Then it became really spooky. And I had about 30 people involved with it. They were all dressed up, and they were the residents of Eastwood Manor. And they were in each of the rooms. There was a conservatory room, there was a library, there was a dining room, there was a kitchen. And in each of those rooms, they would have to complete some tasks to be able to escape that room. So I
Mm-hmm.
think there was 5 different rooms, and they were all easy. They were like
Mm-hmm.
probably take them 5 minutes to go in and to escape. And one of the cool things is I had so many people involved with it that who were characters in it and that lived in Eastwood Manor that they could help them and to kind
Yeah.
of get through it a little quickly, and they would kind of scare them and spook them in that as well. But the real thing that I would encourage anybody with is what I learned from this. The last room that they would go to was the room where I was in. And this was, we just, for churchy terms, we'll call it the gospel presentation room.
Yeah.
And so I would get 20 students to come in at a time, and they would come into that room, and I would talk to them about how do you escape life's greatest fear? How do you escape sin? How do you escape the possibility of going to hell? And I presented the gospel to them. And I learned something from that, and I got a great response from that. I don't remember the exact numbers, but we had hundreds of kids that came through, and probably close to 100 that made salvation decisions. But the effectiveness of presenting the gospel to those individual groups of 20 rather
Mhm.
than to 200 and 300 at one time
Yeah.
really clicked. And so from that point on, in most of the big evangelistic events that I did, we tried to model that,
Yeah.
where instead of sharing the gospel once, that they would come through a rotation of things or games, or in this case, it was escape rooms.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, they would sit down with 10, 15, 20 people at a time, and we would share the gospel with them and be able to get, I thought, a little bit better response, and they were more attentive and they were listening. Um, and so I would say that not only was that probably one of the most creative, fun, out of the box kind of events that we did, but I really learned their more effective way of doing evangelism with teenagers. And so I'd love to pass that along to anybody that could help.
Yeah, no, and I remember when you were just completing it, you invited us over to come look at it, and it was really cool. And for lack of a better term, it was almost like a judgment house in the sense that you would go from room to room, and it was themed,
Yeah.
and and it was way better than a judgment house. So anybody that's listening, think way higher level than a judgment house. But that was kind of the thing is you would walk from room to room, and it really was done super well. And I remember there being a huge buzz about people wanting to go be part of that. And so, but I do love what you're saying because yeah, when you think of evangelistic event, the thought is get everybody in a big room and have somebody try to draw the net. But I get what you're saying. Yeah, if you can have them 10 to 20, it's a lot easier and a
Yeah.
lot less distraction probably. So that's a good word. And so again, selfishly though, I do want to ask you, you had a because I'm middle school. I think sixth through eighth grade a lot. You had a sixth grade thing that you did for your sixth graders in that first year. Just do you mind just walking through that just kind of quickly? What did that look like for your sixth graders? Because I thought that was unique.
Yeah. So when I came to Eastwood, it was the first time I had sixth graders in our ministry. Before that, previous two churches, our youth ministry started at seventh grade. So I received these sixth graders. I was like, man, I don't know what to do with them. So the first year, I just kind of watched them, and they didn't, they weren't really signing up to go to YEC or DNOW, summer camps. It was kind of like they were in this kind of weird, funky kind of mood. And I don't know, it may have just been the group for that year, but what it did do was inspire me to think, man, I just want to do better ministry for them. And so we created this, what was called the sixth grade year of passage. And they would still be a part of the youth group on Wednesday nights and for big things. But I didn't invite them yet to go to like YEC or DNOW, some of the retreats, some of the overnight things. And I wanted to do my own thing just for sixth graders. So we planned basically 4 or 5 passage events throughout the year. And this was also a way for us to connect parents to our youth ministry. So the parents had to be a part of the sixth grade year of passage with the students. So the first thing we did was a passage retreat in the fall where parents would come. I started doing this out in tents behind our church.
Oh my
And for a
gosh.
lot of these sixth graders and families, they'd never camped out in a tent before. And so it was really fun for me to get to experience that with them. But we would do this retreat together. We build relationships. I'd always have some training there for the parents on what's coming up in our youth ministry for the year, and then some fun stuff for the kids to do. But then I would have them, they had 3 or 4 passage projects that they would have to complete as a family. Parents had to be a part of it with the sixth graders, and they would do that throughout the year. And one of the big things was the purity passage getaway. I'll never forget a Wednesday night it was after a Wednesday night. We had broken up into some small groups, and I walked up on kind of a horrific scene. I had a volunteer leader and a parent, and they were going after it. And I
Oh
was like,
gosh.
oh, what is going on? What just happened here? And the parent was upset because the youth leader had talked about purity and sexual things biblically
Mhm.
in that night. And the parent was like livid. I'm not ready to talk about those. Who gives you the right to talk about those things with
Yeah.
my child? Da, 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 da. Well, the youth leader, of course, comes to me and says, Brad, I didn't, another kid brought it up. They're
Yeah.
asking these questions and they're wanting
Yeah.
to talk about it. And so one of the things that I did from that point on was I kind of freed my sixth grade leaders that they would not have those conversations in sixth
Mhm.
grade. And that if those conversations did come up, that they would divert that to, hey, your parents are going to have the opportunity to take you on what's called a Purity Passage getaway later this year. And why don't you save those questions? You'll be able to talk to them about some of those. And so it kind of brought on a standard for sixth grade that my sixth grade leaders were freed up not to have to talk about it, but also to my parents at the beginning of the year, that retreat, I would tell them, we're not going to bring up that subject this year.
Yeah.
You're going to get to talk about it at their Purity Passage getaway. But then from seventh grade on, it's
Fair
open.
game.
Like
Yeah.
it's fair game. And so we want to give you as a parent the opportunity. We'll give you the resources. We're going to plan the getaway for you, that you can have those conversations, initiate those conversations with your sixth grader. Obviously, for some of them, they needed to have those conversations in fourth and fifth grade. And if they do
Yeah.
come to me and ask for it, I'll go ahead and give them the resources. But then, praise the Lord, there's some kids, they didn't need to have those conversations till eighth grade.
Yeah.
But we gave the parent, we put it on to the parent to
Yeah.
be able to do that. So the way it kind of ended was that if the parent and the sixth grader committed to the retreat, to completing the projects, to doing the Purity Passage getaway, that our church would fund a passage trip to San Antonio for
Mhm.
the entire family to go on. And we take them to Schlitterbahn, we take them to Fiesta, Texas, Magic Time Machine. And it was a real way, it was a really good way for us to build into that sixth grade and build into those parents and solidify those relationships that would continue throughout their years in our student ministry.
Yeah, and as a middle school pastor, I would probably guess those families that went through that, they stuck with you for the rest of their time. You know, they made a priority of their student going to church because they saw not only your heart, but they saw that this is somewhere my student needs to be, and so they made that investment
Right.
in their student ministry. And so, if you're a student pastor listening to this, don't just neglect your sixth and seventh graders. Don't just say, you know, they'll catch up with whatever we're doing. You heavily need to invest not only in them, but mainly the parents, because sixth, seventh,
Right.
and eighth grade, the kids basically have no choice whether or not they come. The mom and dad determine that. So you need to help the parents see that this is a place that my student needs to be, because they're going to grow in all these areas. So anyway, thank you for sharing that. I know that's going to
Yeah.
help somebody. Um, that intentionality with sixth grade is a big deal. Let's hop in a little different subject. So that was some good things that you did, some of the most creative things. What would you say is one thing, if you look back on your student ministry time, that you would have done differently?
Well, for sure, I wish I'd have gone on more mission trips.
Mm.
That would have been an area that I was weak at. I tell you though, I learned that lesson. I've got a daughter who's 16, and she's been with me to Bulgaria, ministering to the Roma people. She's been to the Dominican Republic on the streets with girls who are in prostitution, her age and younger. And she's been on the streets with me in London, ministering to Muslims on the street, doing street evangelism, and just seeing her in those situations. I really regret that I didn't take more students on trips like that.
Yeah.
And you think about all the, what if this happens? What if that happens? Or what if they're not prepared? Yeah,
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, I probably let just my own fears of taking students internationally get in the way. That I wish, I would have done that differently and taken more students and planned some more international trips and even regional trips. I just feel like they want to and they're ready, and they need to be pushed out, and parents need to be pushed out to let them go too. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a parenting issue as well, because a lot of parents say, well, I'll never send my kids overseas. Well, let the student go to that parent and say, God's calling me to go, and you watch
Yeah,
the faith of that parent develop as well,
for
because that
sure.
parent's going to have faith to let that student go. And so, yeah, that'd probably be one area that I would go back and do differently.
Okay. Yeah, that's because I had no clue what your answer was going to be, but I probably wouldn't have guessed that because when I think of y'all's ministry or like the students that have went through, I can name a handful of students that have surrendered to full time missions for y'all, that have went out and did it.
Correct.
So that is interesting that because whatever y'all did apparently had an impact because there's students that like I think
Yeah.
of like Coach Walker's daughter is right now overseas doing overseas missions because of stuff she did with y'all. But that is something I think student ministries have become very event driven, focused on what can we do here, how can we reach our schools, which is great. But yeah, a lot of student ministries aren't doing international big mission stuff. Um, and if students go on those missions, that changes their heart for a lifetime
That's right.
once they see outside of the
Right.
scope of Halton or wherever they are. So anyway, I
Well,
think that's great.
there was a time that we had a missions pastor at Eastwood, and
Okay.
we had mission trips that were available. That if a student wanted to go, like a Katie Walker, she would go,
Yeah.
and she did that. And there were several others who would do that, but we didn't do a lot of just student ministry trips.
Yeah. I got you.
That would have been, what I would have called probably targeted more students being able to go
Yeah. That makes sense.
than some of those others. But we did a lot of service projects,
Yeah.
regional projects, but it was
Mhm.
the international missions that I feel like I could have done better at.
Yeah. That's a good word. Well, I want to look at one more thing on your time in student ministry. How did you, because you did it for a long time, how was it, you said 20 years? How long were you in student ministry? 20?
Well, I became an intern in 1997, and my first ministry position in 1999 to 2022. So about
Okay.
22, 23 years.
Wow. So, and as you're getting older in student ministry, all of us guys, once you start hitting your 30s, you start getting offers to do other things or to go try to do something else. And so, how did you stay inspired? Do you know what? I'm just going to stay in student ministry, because you definitely could have left 10 years before and done something else. But how did you stay inspired year after year to continue in student ministry?
You know, I felt like I had a calling to do it,
Yeah.
and I felt like in that calling there was no plan B. I
Yeah.
just I didn't really let a lot of outside distractions distract me from it. Um, I never forget though Johnny Derwin going to Fuego and listening to him speak about youth ministry. He said years and years ago, uh, he said, we have a population of students, and at the time, I think they were like 14 to 20-year old, and he said they're the largest population in America, and they're going to change America. They're going to influence America like the baby boomers have done
Yeah.
previously, and so I remember sitting there listening to him and thinking, man, I want to use my gifts, and I want to use my calling, and I want to use whatever I can bring to ministry to minister to the group that's going to make the biggest impact in the world. And that really inspired me that this population group was going to do that, and so I wanted to pour into them, and that kind of kept me motivated, kept me going. I think that group now is the 20 to 28-year olds
Yeah.
in that group, but it motivated me, even more that I'm making an impact on, a group that's going to change our world. Literally, they're gonna change the world. Their vote can change the world one day, and so that was a motivating factor to me. But obviously, the calling God laid on my life, and just knowing that He had called me to youth ministry, and there was no plan B for me. Never wanted there to be a plan B for me
Yeah.
until obviously I'm not anymore. But that was a little different. My wife would always ask me, Brad, are you going to be a youth pastor until you retire? And
Yeah.
I'd say I plan on it.
Yeah.
That's my plan. Um, I don't know if that's what God's plan is going to be all this time, but if He does call me to something else, then I'm going to go kicking and screaming because I love what I do.
Yeah.
And I did. I just absolutely loved it. I would say to somebody, you part of loving it. Of course, you got a calling. That's a part of that, and you've got to be inspired. You got to have that reason for doing it. But also, I surrounded myself with a team of my best friends in
Mhm.
ministry there, and
It's good.
my leadership team, my youth mentors. These people were my friends, and I just loved serving them, and I loved equipping them, and so surround yourself with friends, staff members. Right? We had staff. Our staff loved each other, and we had great relationships. And of course, that helps out as well. But another thing I would say to keep inspired, for 5 days you got to work hard and bust your tail in ministry. There's no getting away from that. You hard work is going to pay off. Uh, but when you get your days off, take those days off. And I guarded my Fridays and my Saturdays that were off. And I look back now, and I'm just so thankful I didn't get burned out. And part of that was when man I Fridays and Saturdays, most not all of them, but most of them, I took days off and really got away. I love to fish, so I went fishing. I got in the boat, got away from things, spent time with my family. Um, so I would say in somebody looking in ministry, if you're going to be in this long term, you got to have your calling. You got to find what's inspiring you. You got to surround yourself with people you love working with and who are going to be your friends in ministry. And you got to take the time off that you deserve, and take time off well, and enjoy your time off, and work hard 5 days, take that time off those 2 days.
All right. Well, you led right up to my fifth question. So then, how did you know it was finally your time to transition out of student ministry into pastoral ministry? What was kind of that aha moment? You're like, all right, Lord, I see you're opening this door. So, what was that for you?
Okay. Well, when my pastor came to me and said he was about to leave and he was going to go to another ministry, he asked me if I would consider being the interim. And I remember that kind of sparked just some deep praying as to whether or not I wanted to become the interim pastor. And so I was praying about that, and just, Lord, if this is where you want me to go, you're going to have to make this so evident to me, because I don't want to do this. I want to stay in youth ministry. I'm going to have to go kicking and screaming. Well, a couple of weeks later, I was going to preach on a Sunday morning, and he was going to be away. Actually, that's when he was going in view of a call to this church. And so he asked me to preach. It was also that Sunday, for some reason, we started Vacation Bible School that Sunday night. And so I preached that Sunday morning. And then that Sunday night, I had an event that took place that God absolutely confirmed in me that he was moving me from youth ministry to senior pastor kind of ministry. And that was going to begin with taking this interim position. And it goes all the way back to my call in ministry. Uh, I was 20 years old when I surrendered to ministry, and I was going to McNeese State University. Um, I got involved very quickly with the BCM there, and they were going on a trip to San Antonio. And at the last minute, I jumped into this trip, and I said, I'll go with you. I want to go. Let's go serve. And so I jumped in, and we're doing ministry in San Antonio at this church. And they asked us, would y'all stay and lead our worship service on Sunday? And so I had with it, my team was about 10 people. And so we said, yeah, we'll do that. And so while we're there, we started planning what we're going to do on Sunday. And somebody said, well, who's going to lead the music? And everybody looked around. I said, I'll lead the music. I can do that. Y'all got to help me, but I'll do it. And then, all right, who wants to give a testimony? No, I'll give it. I mean, I just surrendered my life to the Lord. Absolutely, I'll share my testimony. Well, who
Yeah.
wants to preach? Nobody said anything. I'll preach.
Yeah.
I said, yeah. I mean, heck, why not? And so that Sunday, of course, they helped me, but I led the service and I shared my testimony and I preached for the first time I'd ever preached. And we're lined up out front after the service, and this lady, people are coming around just shaking our hands and just telling us, "Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here." And this lady came and grabbed me by the hands, and she said, "I don't know why God wanted me to come tell you this, uh, but He's anointed you to preach." And I just said, "Thank you. That's wonderful. I appreciate that." I didn't think twice about it. Well, we went straight from that church. We went to San Antonio, Texas. I mean, in downtown San Antonio, Texas, to a homeless shelter. And we get there and we serve food, and they have a church service there every Sunday. And they asked, "Who wants to preach?" "I'll preach." And so I stood up and I preached that sermon. And afterwards, this lady comes to me and she grabs me by the hands. She said, "I've been coming here for 10 years, serving on Sundays. And I hear preacher after preacher who comes. She's like, I don't know why God wanted me to tell you this, but He's anointed you to preach." And when she said that, that's when I felt the calling on my life into ministry. And so I went, of course, from there and surrendered to ministry. And so that was my call experience. Well, now we're going back to preaching this sermon on this Sunday morning. And then that Sunday night, we start Vacation Bible School. And I've been praying, "Lord, what are you leading me to do? Lord, what are you calling me into? Is this something I need to pursue?" And this lady walks through the hall. I've never seen her before. I didn't know her name. She walked up, she grabbed me by the hand. She said, "I came to church this morning." And she said, "I don't know why God wanted me to come and tell you this, but He's anointed you to preach." And I left right then, and I went and sat in my office chair, and I just started crying.
Yeah.
And I said, "Lord, you couldn't have made it any clearer for me. And I know this is not what I want to do, but Lord, I'm going to surrender just like I did in 1997 when I surrendered to ministry. I'm going to surrender. If you want me to lead youth ministry and become a senior pastor, I'll do it." And so that was my transition. It for me, like it had to be something like that. It may not have to be like that for everybody, but for me, it did, because I never wanted to leave youth ministry. I loved it. I was passionate about it, and God had to make it really clear.
That's so cool. And I've always heard people say that God doesn't hide His will from us. Like whatever God's will for us is, He's going to make it evident, for us. If we're seeking, if we're in prayer, if we're in His word, He'll make His will evident. And so that's really cool. I never heard that story from you. And so that's really cool how God did that in your life. But anyway, Brad, man, thank you so much. It was fun to get to catch up with you. We don't get to talk enough,
right?
But get to catch up and then get to hear some highlights from your student ministry, things that you would maybe do differently, and then also how God transitioned you to pastoral ministry. And so it's been fun to watch y'all's ministry from afar, and then knowing also your new student pastor, I guess not new, but student pastor y'all have now is one of your old guys, and he's killing it there. And so anyway, thank you so much for being willing to come on and share some of your wisdom with us today.
Enjoyed it, Blake. Yeah, thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah, no problem at all. Well, if you are listening to this and this is your first time to listen to Picking Your Brain podcast, we drop episodes as frequent as we can with guests just like Brad that have student ministry experience that we all can learn from. So subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out some of our old episodes, and we'll see you soon.